Well, it's not an ending, but it's a beginning, and it's a start. You know, I was talking with my wife, Sandy, here this last week, as she was doing a little bit of Christmas shopping, and she said she went out to get something for a friend that she heard this friend really liked, that you can only find in this one small little specialty store in a strip mall somewhere in Portage. I said, well, what are you getting her? And she said, I'm getting her chocolate-covered bacon. And I went, you doing what? She said, I'm getting her chocolate-covered bacon. And I'm like, I mean, my mind is short-circuiting. I love bacon. I love chocolate. Chocolate-covered bacon? And I kind of reminded, sometimes there are things that don't seem to go together, but for some reason, when you put them together, apparently they're okay. That's why I never tried Chinese food for years. I looked at stuff on a plate of Chinese food, and I went, those things don't go together. But then I tried them, it's like, well, not bad. Sometimes there are odd couplets of things that you would never think really are connected, really go together, should really be together. But lo and behold, they do, and it's kind of cool. We see this in the animal world a lot, kind of some odd couples. Like, here's a picture that was snapped at a zoo in Asia. It's like, God, just go ahead and say it. Aww. You know, this monkey had actually escaped and they couldn't capture it. And it was going without food. And they found it one morning, kind of cuddled up next to this bird that was just letting it rest its head on its wing. And then I came across this picture, another kind of an odd couple. I mean, here's a puppy nursing white tiger cubs. I mean, the one should be eating the other, but instead it's a couple that kind of works, even though it's really, really odd. This picture was taken in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Next slide, Jeff. Yeah, that's right. I mean, the frog kind of making out okay, and the mouse kind of piggybacking to make it through the flood. I mean, things that you don't think normally go together, but for some reason they get together and they just work. Now, this is cute when it comes to animals. It can be a little pathetic when it comes to people. Like, can somebody explain this to me? I don't get this. All right? I mean, Demi Moore is old enough to be Ashton Kutcher's mother. I do not get how they are together. That's just way too weird for me. And speaking of word, can somebody explain how this ever happened? Seriously. How did Julia Roberts ever get together with Lyle Lovett? I realize the marriage only lasted a year and a half, which in Hollywood years is like 2 decades of marriage. But it's just weird. But sometimes two things that just don't appear to go together get put together and they get linked together. And sometimes you just kind of like, you go, well, maybe that's not so bad. Here's 2 other things that kind of fall into that category. Because you wouldn't think they go together, but they do. Death and grace. I mean, death, that's about as bad as it gets, isn't it? And grace is about as good as it gets. Grace. That undeserved favor where you give someone not what they deserve, but what they need. Just because they need. And yet, as it turns out, death and grace are inextricably linked. And they're linked in at least 2 powerful ways. Here is the first way that death and grace are inextricably linked. At the time of death, we always value grace. When the clock runs out, and only zeros are showing, and someone or something is dead, at that moment, grace matters. If we showed it, we are so thrilled that we did. If we failed to show it, we are just guilt-ridden that we didn't give grace, that we didn't overlook our long list of offenses and somehow get it out of the way to move toward a person in love, forgiveness, and understanding. In my profession, I see this all the time. I've been at funerals where people haven't gotten along and then one of them dies. And suddenly, I mean, it's like the person still living can't spend enough money on a casket. Can't spend enough money on a funeral. Can't spend enough money on a flower arrangement. Gives this long, flowery eulogy, all driven over guilt that they didn't treat the person better when they were alive. They couldn't find the grace to overcome the conflicts and move into a person's life with love. And I see it happen all the time when relationships die. And when the spouse finally walks out, or when the child finally says, that's it, I'm never coming back, I hate you. At that moment, suddenly people are left with it, oh man, why wasn't I more gracious? Why didn't I just overlook stuff? Why did I have to get bent out of shape? Why couldn't I just overcome it and move toward that person in love? When death comes, we value grace. It's like death is an ammonia capsule sort of wafted under our nose, and suddenly our heads are clear, and we see everything so perfectly. Yes, grace, giving what they need. That's what I should have done. And when it's too late, then we see it so clearly. The day will come for us all when we'll look at the situations where we should have shown grace and didn't, and we'll suddenly want to very much, but the clock has struck midnight and there's no more time. There's another way that death and grace are inextricably linked, and that is simply this. In order to extend grace, there's got to be a death. In order to extend grace, something's got to die. If we want to extend grace to a person who's hurt us, that are at odds with, that has disappointed us, that has frustrated us to no end, and if we want to finally give them grace, we're going to have to do a little bit of dying. We're going to have to die to our craving for vengeance. That person be punished for what they've done. We're going to have to die to our desire to be angry over what they've done for us. And we're going to have to die to our expectation that if we give them grace, they must respond to us in a certain way. And if we don't die to our need for vengeance, to punish, if we don't die to our anger, if we do not die to our expectations, if we don't give them up and die to them, we can never really move toward anyone in grace. Because if we won't give these things up, if we won't die to them, then we're not really giving grace. We're trying to make a deal. Grace comes with no strings attached. But a deal says, I'll move toward you in a really nice way as long as you move back toward me in a way that I expect. That's not grace. That's a deal. I'm sure you know, on Capitol Hill, they have been scrambling to try to get health care legislation passed by the end of the year, Christmas.